What happens when a promise made in the dead of winter melts into a love that burns everything it touches? Snow fell that night like ash from a dying fire, soft, endless, and eerily quiet. The kind of silence that makes you believe the world is holding its breath. On the terrace of a glass mansion overlooking the frozen bay, a man stood alone, wrapped in the ghostlight of the city below. Alexander Vale, billionaire, visionary, devastatingly composed, and entirely broken. The party inside roared with laughter and champagne. People who had never known hunger or heartbreak toasted to another year of excess, but Alexander's glass remained untouched. He stared out at the snow and whispered something so faint, the wind almost swallowed it. I promised her. To anyone watching, he was the embodiment of success, the ruthless young CEO who built an empire out of nothing. But that night, beneath the veneer of control, the weight of a single promise was crushing him. Because somewhere between the frozen contracts and cold negotiations, he'd made a vow, one that had started in the dark alleys of his past. Long before the billions, before the cameras, before her, 2 winters earlier, he wasn't standing on marble floors. He was fighting to keep his company alive, sleeping in boardrooms, eating vending machine meals, and convincing investors that his vision was worth believing in. The nights were long and sharp then, and one of those nights he met her, Elise Morrow. She wasn't supposed to be part of his story, a consultant hired to audit his failing business, sharp, efficient, and colder than the snow that dusted her hair when she first walked into his life. Her heels clicked like the sound of a countdown. She didn't smile, didn't flatter, just looked him in the eye and said, "You're bleeding money, I can stop it. But it's going to hurt." He liked her immediately. Not because she was beautiful, though she was, in that quiet, dangerous way that keeps men awake at night, but because she saw through him, through the armor, through the confidence, through the lies he told himself. The first weeks were war. Meetings turned into verbal duels, every word a weapon. She challenged his authority, mocked his optimism, dismantled his empire piece by piece only to build it back stronger. Somewhere in that battlefield of spreadsheets and strategy, something began to shift. One night, after a 14-hour day, the storm outside had buried the city. The power went out. The office plunged into darkness, save for the faint glow of the emergency lights. They sat there, surrounded by papers, silence stretching between them. Elise was leaning against the window, watching snow whip against the glass. "Do you ever stop fighting?" she asked. He turned to her. "If I stop, everything falls apart." She smiled, a small, tired thing. Maybe some things need to fall apart first. That was the first time he noticed the scar near her collarbone, a pale line, almost hidden, like a secret she never wanted to tell. He wanted to ask, but didn't. Instead, he offered his coat. She refused. "Cold keeps me awake," she said. "And I don't like to dream." That winter changed everything. Together, they rebuilt his company. She became his confidant, his strategist, his storm. But somewhere between the deadlines and midnight coffees, between shared glances and unspoken words, a line blurred. One night, he almost crossed it. They were in the conference room finalizing a merger deal that could save them both. The city lights shimmered like spilled gold through the windows. She looked at him, exhaustion softening her usual edge. "When this is over," she said quietly, "promise me something, anything. Promise me you won't forget why you started." He laughed. "That's all." Her gaze lingered on him a moment too long. "And promise me you'll never fall for someone you can't have." Before he could reply, she stood and left. The echo of her heels was the only sound in the empty room. The deal succeeded. The company rose from the ashes, stronger than ever. But Elise, she disappeared. No goodbye, no explanation, just gone. Months later, Alexander found out why. An article buried deep in the financial pages. Consultant Elise Moreau joins rival firm Ethereum Group. His rival, the same man who had once tried to destroy him. Betrayal doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers. He read that headline over and over, trying to understand. The woman who had rebuilt his empire had handed her brilliance to the enemy. It didn't make sense. Unless it was deliberate. He buried himself in work again, colder than before. Ruthless, efficient, untouchable. But no matter how many zeros appeared in his accounts, there was always that echo, her voice in his mind, asking him to remember why he started. Then, 1 year later, she reappeared. It was at a charity gala, crystal chandeliers, champagne laughter, the illusion of generosity. She walked in like winter itself, in a silver gown that shimmered under the lights. The room shifted around her, conversations dimming to murmurs. When their eyes met, time fractured. He forced a smile. "You're working for Ethereum now. Shouldn't you be sitting with your master?" She didn't flinch. "Shouldn't you be celebrating your victory instead of chasing ghosts?" Her words cut deep, but there was something behind them. Fear, regret, longing, the kind of emotion no corporate allegiance could explain. Later that night, away from the cameras, they found themselves alone on the balcony. Snow again. Always snow. "Why did you leave?" he asked, voice low, almost trembling. She looked out at the city. "Because I had to." That's not an answer. She turned to him then, eyes shining like fractured glass. "He found out about us. There was no us." Her silence said otherwise. "He threatened to destroy your company if I didn't walk away," she continued. He had proof, false but convincing. I thought I could fix it from inside. I thought I could protect you. He stared at her, heart hammering. You think betrayal is protection? She took a step closer. I think love is sometimes the cruelest way to keep someone safe. The words hung between them, fragile and dangerous. And then she kissed him. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate, defiant, the kind of kiss that makes you realize how long you've been starving. The city burned below them in rivers of light, and for the first time in years, he felt alive. But the thing about stolen fire is that it always burns. The next morning, news broke that Ethereum's accounts had been compromised, insider leaks, stolen data, whispers of espionage. Elise vanished again, leaving behind nothing but a single message on his desk. Keep your promise. He should have reported it. Instead, he erased every trace of her involvement. Maybe it was guilt, maybe it was love, maybe both, but in protecting her he exposed himself. And that brings us back to the present, to the snow, to the silence, to the man standing on the terrace staring into the void. His empire is stronger than ever, but rumors are spreading. Investigators are circling, and a new headline has begun to surface. Anonymous whistleblower linked to corporate sabotage. Somewhere, someone is moving against him, and he knows deep down that it's her. Because Elise Moreau never made idle promises, and neither did he. The storm outside thickens, wind howling against the glass. Alexander lifts his glass at last, toasting no one. The reflection in the window shows a man who has everything, except peace. And then, his phone buzzes. An encrypted message. No name, just one sentence. You forgot why you started. His fingers tremble as he opens the attachment, a single photograph. Elise, standing in front of a private jet. The logo on the side reads Ethereum, but behind her, the snow isn't white. It's burning flames licking through the frost, smoke twisting into the night sky. For a long moment, he just stares. Then he whispers, almost to himself, "What did you do?" The wind carries his words away, into the cold. Somewhere out there she's moving again, playing a game only she understands. And as the fire consumes the horizon, Alexander Vale realizes something terrifying. The promise he made in winter may have just become the war that will burn them both alive. The screen fades to black, but the story has just begun. The flames from the photograph seemed almost alive, dancing across Alexander's reflection in the window. He couldn't look away. It wasn't just the jet or the burning snow, it was her expression.com/defiant, as if she'd set the world on fire on purpose and was waiting for him to watch it burn. That night he didn't sleep. The wind howled through the empty halls of the mansion, carrying echoes of conversations long dead. Every flicker of light from the city below looked like another secret unraveling. By dawn, his decision was made. He called his assistant. "Find her, sir." "Who?" "Elise Moreau. I want everything, flights, bank records, sightings. I don't care what it costs." There was a pause. "She's already being investigated." Corporate security flagged her name after the breach. Ethereum's network was hit harder than they're admitting. He froze. Hit how? Financial collapse level. Someone wiped 200 million in assets overnight. It's chaos over there. For a moment he thought he misheard. Elise had always played the long game, every move measured, not reckless, not explosive, unless the chaos was part of her design. "Get me a meeting with Ethereum's CEO, Alexander said. The assistant hesitated. "Sir, after what happened between your companies, do it," he interrupted, his voice steel. 2 hours later, he was on a helicopter slicing through gray skies, the city shrinking beneath him like a chessboard. The skyline glimmered in shades of steel and smoke. Below, the bay was still frozen, the same water that mirrored his first promise to her. Everything felt circular now, as if fate had never really let go. The Ethereum headquarters rose ahead, a tower of black glass cutting into the clouds. When he stepped into the lobby, he could feel the tension in the air, security officers whispering, analysts hurrying with files, faces pale with confusion. Whatever Elise had done, it had carved through this place like a blade. He was escorted to the top floor. Adrian Corr, Ethereum's CEO, was waiting. The man's smile was sharp, but his eyes betrayed exhaustion. "Vale," Adrian said, gesturing to a seat. "Didn't expect you to come here uninvited. Brave, considering your last acquisition nearly crushed us." Alexander sat without answering. "Where is she?" Adrian chuckled. "You mean your little ghost, the one who played both sides? I'm not here for your amusement." The older man leaned forward, voice dropping. "You should be. She destroyed me, Alexander. She destroyed us both." He slid a file across the desk. Inside were photographs, surveillance stills, Elise entering Ethereum's data center, leaving minutes before the explosion that had crippled their servers. In one image she looked directly at the camera, not fearful, intentional. "She took everything," Adrian said. "Data, clients, leverage. And you know what the last thing she said to me was? Promises are only cold when you forget why you made them." The words hit him like a ghost of their first night. Alexander closed the file. "If she wanted to ruin you, she wouldn't have left a trail." Adrian's smirk faded. "Then what do you think she's doing?" He didn't answer, because he didn't know. By the time he left the tower, snow had started again, soft, relentless. His car idled by the curb, engine humming like a distant warning. Inside, he stared out at the city. Elise wasn't destroying for revenge. She was dismantling something larger. But what? Back at his office, his analyst had news. We traced the encrypted message. It came from a relay in Zurich, routed through 6 fake accounts. Anything else? Yes, the last ping came from your company's internal network. He looked up sharply. Meaning whoever sent it had access to your servers. Sir, it came from one of your systems. The room fell silent. The air seemed to thicken. He dismissed the analyst, then sat back in his chair, the city's light spilling through the blinds like fractured gold. Elise had left him a message, but she'd done it from inside his own walls. Was she warning him, or setting him up? The next days unfolded like a storm in slow motion. Investigators arrived, reports surfaced, his board demanded answers, and through it all, he felt her presence invisible, orchestrating something he couldn't see. Then came the second message. No photograph this time, just coordinates. Latitude, longitude, somewhere off the coast of Norway. The note below it read, "One last promise." He booked a flight that night. The jet cut through the northern sky, over endless fields of white. The closer they came to the coordinates, the more desolate the world became. Mountains like jagged teeth, the ocean below a sheet of frozen glass. Finally, they landed near a remote research station, long abandoned. The wind screamed through the steel ruins. Snowflakes spiraled like lost memories. And there, standing in the doorway of a rusted hangar, was Elise. She hadn't changed much, still composed, still unknowable. But her eyes, there was something in them now. Fire and fear. He approached slowly. "You're alive," she smiled faintly. "You sound disappointed." "I should be. You destroyed everything." "No," she said softly. "I exposed everything." He stopped a few feet away. "What are you talking about?" Elise turned toward the hangar. Inside, old computers flickered to life. Screens covered in data streams, maps, transactions, offshore accounts. Adrian Cor's empire was built on corruption, money laundering, political ties, human trafficking disguised under development projects. You didn't see it, because you were fighting to survive. I did. You could have told me. You wouldn't have believed me, she said. Back then, you were too busy becoming him. Her words stung more than the cold. I worked inside his system for a year, she continued. Collected proof. Every contract, every illegal transfer. When I left that message, the one you received, I needed you to know it was over. That I kept my promise, he frowned. Promise. She looked at him then, eyes glimmering like wet steel. To never let you become what you hated. The truth landed like a blow. All this time, she wasn't betraying him. She was saving him in her own impossible way. He stepped closer, his breath clouding in the frozen air. You think this redeems you? It's not about redemption, she whispered. It's about survival. The world you built, Alexander, it's beautiful, but it's built on the same rot that feeds men like him. I wanted to give you a way out. He stared at the screens, the evidence, the chaos she'd unleashed. You didn't have to do it alone. I did, she said quietly, because love makes people reckless. And you're the most dangerous when you care. Outside, the wind rose, carrying the sound of distant engines, helicopters, lights cutting through the blizzard. She turned sharply toward the sound. They found us, she said. Who? Aetherian security. And not just them. Within seconds, the night erupted in red beams and shouting. Armed figures moved through the snow, their voices echoing across the frozen plain. Alexander grabbed a hand. This way they ran through the ruins, boots crunching on ice. Bullets shattered metal nearby, sparks flying into the night. He dragged her into a side tunnel, heart pounding. Why didn't you tell me about this sooner? He hissed. Because I didn't trust you to walk away, she said. You always have to win. He wanted to argue, but she was right. They emerged into a maintenance corridor that led to a frozen dock. An old boat bobbed against the ice, its hull half buried in snow. Elise jumped aboard, starting the engine. Where are we going? He shouted over the wind. Somewhere they can't reach, she said. At least for tonight. The motor coughed to life, cutting through the fog. The helicopter circled overhead, but the snow swallowed visibility. They slipped into the mist, shadows against the void. For hours, they said nothing. Only the groan of the ice beneath them and the hum of the engine filled the silence. Finally, she spoke. When we met, you said you'd do anything to protect your company. Do you still mean that? He looked at her. Yes, then destroy it. He blinked. What? You don't see it yet, but your empire isn't clean either. Half your investors are connected to Core. The system is the same. If you don't burn it now, it will consume you. He stared at her, stunned. You're asking me to erase everything I built. I'm asking you to remember who you were before all of this. The moon broke through the clouds then, a pale, ghostly light spilling over her face. She looked fragile for the first time, like the war she'd been fighting was finally catching up to her. What happens after? He asked quietly. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. After we start again. Somewhere no one knows our names. He wanted to believe her, but deep down, he knew the world doesn't let people like them start over. By dawn, they reached the shore, a desolate stretch of ice where the sun barely rose. She stepped off the boat, her breath coming in short bursts. In the distance, faint sirens echoed through the wind. She handed him a drive, small, silver, cold as her hand. Everything's on this evidence files, proof of what they did. It's enough to bring the whole system down. He took it, fingers trembling. At you. I'll draw them away, she said. They still think I'm the one holding it. No, he said firmly. You're not walking into that. Her eyes softened. You don't have a choice. Before he could stop her, she leaned in and pressed her forehead against his. For a second, everything was silent. The cold, the fear, the lies, all gone. Just the people who had built and broken too much to ever go back. Keep your promise, she whispered. Then, she was gone, running across the snow, disappearing into the blinding white as the sound of engines grew louder. Alexander stood there, the drive burning in his hand. Behind him, the boat drifted away. Ahead, the world he'd built was collapsing. And somewhere, between the frost and the fire, he understood the truth. The cold promise they had made wasn't about love or loyalty. It was about transformation, the price of survival in a world that rewards only those willing to destroy what they cherish most. He looked once more toward the horizon, where the faint figure of Elise vanished into the storm. The wind swallowed everything. And for the first time in his life, Alexander Vale didn't know whether he wanted to find her or follow her into the fire. The ice cracked beneath his boots as Alexander watched the last trace of her silhouette dissolve into the white horizon. The world felt suspended, no sound, no time, just the echo of her voice carried away by the wind. He wanted to run after her, to pull her back from whatever madness she had chosen, but something heavier held him in place. Duty, fear, love twisted into something colder. He stood there until the sound of rotors faded, until the light thinned into gray. When he finally turned back toward the boat, the horizon had shifted. Dark smoke rose in the far distance. The fire again, always the fire. It was spreading through everything she touched, consuming both of their worlds. Back in London, his return made headlines. The investors were restless. The board demanded explanations for his absence, for the missing funds, for the quiet collapse spreading through their systems like frost over glass. Ethereum's downfall had triggered a chain reaction, investigations, frozen accounts, whispers of collusion. Somewhere in the chaos, someone had leaked the existence of the encrypted drive. He kept it hidden, deep within his private server. Every night he opened it, scrolling through files that shouldn't exist, photos of offshore facilities, confidential contracts, records of human trade, disguised as logistics. Elise had been telling the truth. Adrian Core wasn't just corrupt, he was a spider in a web of politicians and CEOs. And now, with his empire burning, every eye turned to Alexander Vale, because the documents didn't just implicate Core, they implicated Vale Industries too, his own company, his own name. The realization hollowed him. Somewhere along the climb, he'd stopped noticing who he'd partnered with, whose money built his towers, whose silence bought his influence. Elise hadn't just been protecting him, she'd been warning him from the start. For days, he couldn't look at his reflection. Every time he did, he saw pieces of Adrian staring back. The media storm worsened. Journalists camped outside his headquarters, drones hovered above the penthouse, questions sliced through every corridor. Did you know about the offshore accounts? Was Elise Moreau acting under your orders? Is it true you're under investigation for aiding Ethereum's collapse? He ignored them all. The truth was a wound too deep to expose, but the pressure grew unbearable. And on the fourth night, he received another message. This time, it wasn't encrypted. Just a single line, from an unknown number. You still don't understand what's coming. Attached was a video file. Grainy surveillance footage. Elise standing in what looked like a warehouse, speaking to someone out of frame. Her voice was calm, deliberate. We don't have much time, she said. He's starting to question everything. Once he realizes, it'll be too late to save him. The screen glitched. The timestamp read only 36 hours ago. Alexander froze. If she was still alive, who was she talking to? And what did she mean too late to save him? The next morning he called in his head of cybersecurity. Trace this video. Find the original source. An hour later, the man returned, pale. It came from within your company, sir. The words hit like ice. From where? Your private server. The same one that held Elise's drive. He dismissed the team and locked himself in his office. The city below shimmered through the glass walls, a blur of light and shadow. He opened the drive again. Every file, every folder. This time he noticed something new. A hidden directory buried beneath layers of code. One he hadn't created. He decrypted it. Inside were video logs, dozens of them. Elise's face appeared again and again, speaking to the camera. But these weren't recordings of sabotage or evidence gathering. These were confessions, personal, intimate. I don't know when he'll find this, she said in one, but if he does, it means I've failed. Alexander, the promise wasn't just about saving you, it was about destroying what we both became. He leaned closer, barely breathing. In another recording, she looked shaken. They think I'm one of them now. They're watching me, but I can't stop, because if I do, they'll come for him next. For us both, he paused the video, hands trembling. Who were they? The next clip loaded automatically. Elise's face was lit by candlelight, exhaustion etched into her eyes. You once asked me why I never dream. It's because dreams make you believe there's still time. But there isn't. The system doesn't collapse, it consumes. And when it does, it won't matter who's guilty. It'll erase us both, then static. He sat there for hours, staring at the frozen image. Slowly, realization dawned. The leak, the investigation, the attacks, none of it was random. Someone was pulling strings from both sides, feeding chaos to erase every trace of what Elise had uncovered. That night, he called his chief financial officer, a man named Grayson Reed, his most trusted ally. "We're being set up," Alexander said. "There's someone orchestrating this, someone above core, above all of us." Grayson's tone was calm, too calm. "And you think Elise Moreau was the key?" "I know she found something big enough to burn the whole system." A pause. "Then, what makes you so sure she wasn't part of it?" Alexander frowned. "Because I know her." Grayson sighed softly. "That's the problem, Alex, you don't." The line went dead. A chill crept through him. He called back, no answer. Called again, disconnected. Within minutes, his security system flashed red. Unauthorized access. He sprinted to his control room. The servers were being wiped, files disappearing in real time, his entire database gone in seconds. Someone was erasing the company from the inside. And when the last screen went black, a single message appeared, glowing in white. "Keep your promise." He felt the room tilt, the world narrowing to that one phrase. Was it her again? Or someone using her words? The police raided his offices the next day. Warrants, subpoenas, frozen assets. They accused him of insider trading, of corporate espionage, of orchestrating Ethereum's collapse. Everything he had built gone. He refused to speak. He couldn't. The truth was too tangled, too dangerous. That night, alone in his penthouse, he played the final video from Elise's hidden folder. It was different, the tone softer, almost like a goodbye. "If you're watching this, it means they've turned it all against you," she said. "You'll be blamed for what I did, and you'll hate me for it. Maybe that's how it has to be. Because if they think I was working for you, they'll never stop until we're both erased. But if they believe you were my victim," her voice faltered, "then maybe you'll live." He stopped breathing. She had planned it. Every betrayal, every lie, every disappearance. It wasn't chaos, it was choreography. A sacrifice disguised as sabotage. He rewound the last seconds, listening again to her final words. "The only way to break their hold was to become the villain in your story." "I'm sorry." The screen went dark. For the first time in years, Alexander felt tears sting his eyes. He'd spent months hating her, chasing her ghost, trying to decode her motives, and all along she'd been trying to save him in the only way she knew how, by destroying everything that bound him to the world that owned them both. The city lights outside flickered as if the power was trembling too. Somewhere far below, sirens wailed. He walked to the window, watching snow fall over London, soft and indifferent. The same snow that had witnessed their first promise, their last kiss. He thought of her words about becoming what he hated, about destruction as salvation, about the cold promises that kept them both alive. And then, as he stared into the distance, a single light blinked on the horizon, faint, pulsing, like a signal. He narrowed his eyes. It was coming from the outskirts, near the old shipping yards. A message. He didn't hesitate. Within the hour, he was in a car, the city blurring past like a film on fast forward. Streets glistened with rain. His pulse matched the rhythm of the windshield wipers. He drove until the skyline disappeared behind him, replaced by rows of abandoned warehouses and rusted cranes. The light was still there, a single window glowing faintly through the storm. He parked and stepped out into the cold. His footsteps echoed through the emptiness. Inside, the warehouse smelled of salt and metal. The air was heavy with silence. He moved slowly, flashlight cutting through the dark. Then movement, a shadow, Elise, no answer. He advanced further. There, in the center of the room, stood an old projector. It flickered to life as he approached. The beam cast a trembling light onto the far wall, and suddenly her face appeared again, not live, recorded. "You found it," she said softly. "I knew you would." He stood motionless, barely breathing. "This is the last truth," she continued. "The files, the chaos, the collapse, it was never just about core. There's someone else, someone who funded both sides. Your company, his, every competitor in between. They wanted control and they used us to build it." Her image glitched, warped, reformed. "I couldn't tell you before. You would have tried to fight them, and they don't lose, they erase. But maybe now you'll see. The system wasn't burning because of us. It was designed to burn, so they could rebuild it from the ashes." The projector stuttered. The image flickered. "Find them before they find you," she whispered. "And if you ever doubt why I did this," she smiled faintly. "You once said the cold keeps you awake. I hope it still does." The screen went dark. Alexander stood there, surrounded by silence. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and endless. The kind that erases footprints. For the first time, he realized he wasn't standing at the end of the story. He was standing at the beginning of a new one, a larger, darker web that stretched far beyond Elise, beyond core, beyond everything he thought he understood. and as the last flicker of the projector died, he felt it, not fear, but clarity. She hadn't left him a warning. She'd left him a map, but before he could take another step, a voice behind him cut through the dark. "Mr. Vale," it said calmly, "we've been waiting for you." He turned. The light caught a figure stepping out of the shadows, familiar, cold, smiling. It was Grayson Reed, and in that moment Alexander realized the war Elise began was far from over. It was only just revealing its true face. The sound of Grayson's voice cut through the dark like a blade, calm, deliberate, and devastatingly familiar. Alexander froze, every muscle taut, the faint hum of the projector still echoing behind him. The light from the dying film flickered across Grayson's face, revealing the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes, the smile of someone who already knows how the story ends. "We've been waiting for you," he repeated, stepping closer, his shoes crunching on the layer of dust and ice that covered the warehouse floor. Alexander's throat tightened. Grayson tilted his head slightly, as if amused by the question. "You always assumed there were only two sides to this game, yours and theirs, but Elise was right, it's much bigger than that." The air around them seemed to constrict, thick with the quiet hum of unseen machinery. Alexander's eyes darted around the shadows. There were figures, 2, maybe 3, standing along the periphery, silhouettes against the pale light spilling from outside. "Who are they?" he asked. "The ones who've kept this world running long before you or Core thought you owned it," Grayson said. "Investors, governments, names you built your empire on without realizing they were the ones holding the strings." He took another step forward. "You weren't supposed to find this place, Alex. Elise was supposed to disappear, and you were supposed to fall. That's how they keep balance. They erase the anomalies." "She wasn't an anomaly," Alexander said, voice low. "She was the only one who saw the truth." Grayson's expression shifted, a trace of pity, or maybe respect. "She saw too much, and in doing so, she doomed herself." The cold from the open door crept in, mixing with the smell of oil and rust. Somewhere far above, a chain clinked against a metal beam, swinging with the wind. Alexander took a step toward him. "You knew about this from the beginning, didn't you?" Grayson didn't answer. He didn't have to. The silence between them said everything. When Ethereum fell, when the investigations began, it wasn't an accident. "You were feeding them information," Alexander said slowly, piecing it together as the words left his mouth. "You've played both sides." Grayson smiled again, softer this time. "I played the only side that survives." He gestured toward the projector, still warm from the recording. Elise thought she could break the system from within. She forgot that the system doesn't break, it adapts. The words lingered like smoke. "She trusted you," Alexander said. "No," Grayson corrected. "She trusted you and you trusted me. That's the beauty of it. Loyalty is the easiest illusion to exploit." For a moment, neither spoke. The snow outside thickened, tapping gently against the shattered windows. The tension between them stretched thin, vibrating like a wire about to snap. "What did you do to her?" Alexander asked. Grayson's eyes flickered. "She's alive." For now, the words hit with the force of a gunshot. "That depends," Grayson said, folding his hands behind his back, his tone suddenly almost kind, "on whether you're ready to stop running from what you are." Alexander felt the anger rise from somewhere deep, molten beneath the ice. "And what am I?" "Exactly what they want you to be," Grayson said softly. "The successor, the new architect. You've already proven you can build empires out of ashes. Now they want you to do it again on their terms." The air seemed to buzz around him, a static hum of machinery, or maybe nerves. "And if I refuse?" Grayson looked almost disappointed. "You won't, because you'll realize it's the only way to save her." Alexander's breath came slow and sharp, the cold bit into his lungs. "You're lying." Grayson reached into his coat and tossed something across the floor. It slid to Alexander's feet, a photograph, Elise bound, sitting in a dimly lit room, the time stamp from only hours ago. Her expression was calm, her eyes fixed on the camera, on him. "She knew this would happen," Grayson said. "She left you a map, remember? You followed it, and it led you right here to the people who built the map in the first place." Alexander picked up the photo, his hands trembling. "If she's alive, I'll find her." Grayson tilted his head. "Of course you will. That's what makes you perfect for this." They knew you'd never stop. The mention of they felt heavier now, like a presence in the room, invisible, but real. The kind of power that never needs to announce itself. Alexander clenched the photo. "You want me to rebuild something I just helped destroy?" "No," Grayson said. "We want you to replace it." The words hung in the air like frost. He turned toward the shadowed figures in the background. One of them stepped forward, a woman in a gray coat, her face half hidden by the light. "Mr. Vale," she said in a measured tone, "your company was never yours. It was an instrument, a prototype. You proved you can build trust where none should exist. Now we need you to build something new, something global." Alexander stared at her. "And if I don't, then Elise Moreau will die before dawn." The room went silent again. Only the faint whir of the projector remained, flickering against the concrete wall like a heartbeat. He could feel the edges of the world closing in, the choice pressing down on him like the weight of all his sins. accept the deal and become what Elise fought against, or refuse and lose her forever. He turned away, walking toward the window. The night stretched beyond, vast and indifferent. In the distance, the city shimmered beneath its veil of snow, the same city they had once vowed to change. "Do you know why she called it a cold promise?" he said quietly. Grayson raised an eyebrow. "Enlighten me." "Because she knew warmth doesn't last in our world. It melts, it betrays." He turned back, eyes steady, but cold. "Cold endures, and so do promises." For a moment, Grayson looked genuinely uncertain. Then, almost imperceptibly, he smiled. "That's what she said too." The warehouse trembled then, a low, distant rumble that made the floor vibrate. The woman in gray looked toward the ceiling, alarm flickering in her eyes. "What was that?" she hissed. Grayson frowned, tapping his earpiece. "Report," static answered. Then, faintly, the crackle of fire. Alexander's pulse quickened. He turned toward the window again, and there, beyond the docks, flames rose into the night. The same burning pattern as before, controlled, deliberate. Elise, the woman in gray, moved toward the exit. Contain it now. But before she could take another step, the projector flickered back to life on its own. The screen flared white, then filled with an image. Elise, standing in that same dim room, staring directly into the lens. "This is for both of you," she said. Her voice was calm, steady. "You're standing in the place they built to erase us. Every secret, every file, every trace of what they've done ends there, under your feet." Grayson's face drained of color. "No," Elise's recorded voice continued. "They thought they could bury it. But I buried something else, a fail-safe. The truth will burn with or without me." The projector flared again. The lights overhead began to flicker. A deep hum pulsed through the floor. Grayson lunged toward the control panel, shut it down. But it was too late. Alexander could feel it, the faint vibration turning into a roar beneath the concrete. The warehouse itself was alive. "She's detonated the data core," the woman shouted. "Everything's going to blow." Grayson turned to Alexander, fury flashing in his eyes. "You think she's saving you? She's ending you." Alexander looked back at the screen one last time. Elise was still there, smiling faintly, the glow of fire reflecting in her eyes. "Keep your promise," she whispered. The image dissolved into static. The lights died. For a heartbeat, the world was silent, too silent. Then came the sound, a deep, rising thunder from below, the sound of 1,000 buried secrets waking up all at once. Grayson shouted something, a warning, maybe a curse, but Alexander didn't hear. His gaze was fixed on the empty space where her face had been. The walls began to shake. Dust rained from the rafters. The projector crashed to the ground and shattered. And still, amid the chaos, Alexander stood motionless, not from fear, but understanding. Everything Elise had done, the betrayals, the lies, the destruction, it wasn't to save him. It was to end the system completely. To burn not just the web they were caught in, but the world that wove it. The cold promise had never been about love. It had been about revolution. As the first explosion tore through the far wall, Alexander felt the heat rush toward him, the shockwave ripping through the air. In that final instant of clarity before the blast consumed everything, he realized the cruelest truth of all. Elise hadn't died for him. She was making him choose whether to live for her, or with her fire. And as the inferno rose around him, swallowing the warehouse in light, Alexander Vale stepped forward into the blaze that would decide which promise would survive the ashes. The blast swallowed sound first, a vacuum of silence so total it felt holy. Then came the wave, a roar that ripped through steel, glass, and memory. Heat rushed over him, white and merciless. The world fractured into light and motion, fire folding through the air like wings. Alexander hit the ground hard. The force hurled him backward through smoke, into cold. The floor gave way beneath him, and suddenly he was falling through dust, through darkness, through the remnants of everything they had built. He landed on something solid, concrete, maybe. The impact stole his breath. For a long moment, there was nothing but the crackle of fire above and the slow drip of water somewhere far away. The air was thick with smoke and ash, the taste of burnt metal sharp on his tongue. He tried to move, pain answered. When he opened his eyes, he was surrounded by what looked like the skeleton of the world. Old servers split open, wires like veins spilling from shattered walls. Sparks jumped across puddles of water, reflections flickering like dying stars. He dragged himself upright, his ears rang. The entire building trembled above him. Somewhere through the firelight he saw a door hanging off its hinges, a faint glow leaking from beyond it. He staggered toward it. Every step echoed with the sound of destruction collapsing in slow motion. The glow grew brighter. When he stepped through the doorway, he froze. The room beyond wasn't like the others. It was almost untouched, circular, lined with glass and humming machinery. And in the center, a single screen still alive, displaying lines of code racing faster than the eye could follow. But it wasn't the screen that stopped him. It was the image that appeared above it. Elise, not flesh, not presence, projection. A recording activated by the explosion. She stood there in light, eyes soft, voice low. "If you're here, it means everything worked." His knees nearly gave. "I told you the truth would burn," she continued, her expression unreadable. but I didn't tell you what would rise from it. The files we buried under this facility, they're not just evidence. They're the blueprint for what comes next. A world rebuilt, not owned. She stepped closer, her image flickering slightly. You always said you didn't know how to stop fighting, so I made the choice for you. The Empire's gone. The money, the lies, all of it. Now there's only one thing left to decide. Will you rebuild it again or finally let it die? He reached toward the hologram, as if his hand could catch the light that formed her Elise. The recording glitched, her face warping into static for a moment before reappearing. They'll come for you, Grayson. The board, the ones who lost everything tonight. They'll call you the terrorist, the traitor. Maybe they're right. But you know the truth, promises don't die in fire. They become fire. Behind her, through the recording's faint hum, he heard the echo of something real, an explosion, a scream, the chaos from moments ago. This wasn't just a message. It had been timed to unfold as she vanished. She'd built the end like a symphony, each note planned to destroy the illusion of control. I didn't do this to save you, she whispered. I did it to save what was left of us. The part that still believed. The hologram dimmed. For a moment, it seemed she was looking right at him, not the man who had failed her, but the man she had once believed could change everything. Remember the cold, she said. It's what keeps the fire alive. Then she was gone. The screen went black. The silence that followed was unbearable. The fire outside roared louder, devouring what remained of the facility. He could feel the heat climbing closer, the air thinning. His reflection in the dark monitor was ghost-like, half-lit, half-erased. He turned and limped toward the corridor. The path back was gone, buried under rubble and flame. The only exit left led downward into the underbelly of the ruins. He followed it. The deeper he went, the colder it became. The ground turned slick with frost, condensation dripping from broken pipes. The noise above faded to a distant thunder. It was like descending into the body of the world, where everything that burned above was mirrored by everything frozen below. And there, at the bottom, he found her again, not alive, but alive enough. A secondary projection, faint and flickering, waited in the center of the chamber, different from the first, calmer, gentler, her hair unbound, her voice barely more than a whisper. I knew you'd come this far, she said. You always do. The light shimmered around her, reflecting off the ice. If you're seeing this, then the network is gone. The core has been erased, but that means the balance has collapsed. There will be chaos now. They'll fight to rebuild control, and they'll use your name to do it. He stood there, his breath fogging in the cold, her light touching his face. I didn't want to drag you into this again, she continued, but I needed you to see what we were really fighting. It was never about saving a company. It was about ending the illusion that anyone could own the world. He closed his eyes. The words sank into him like snow melting into a wound. I once said I don't dream, she said softly, but that was a lie. I dreamed of you, of us, of a world that didn't demand a price for every feeling. I guess I built that dream the only way I knew how, by destroying everything else. The projection wavered. He reached out instinctively, afraid to lose her again, even if she was only light in memory. I left something for you, she said, in the northern vault. Coordinates embedded in this system. What's there? It's not money, not data. It's what's left of me, the part they couldn't erase. The light dimmed further. Don't let them make you rebuild their world, she whispered. Make your own. Promise me. The hologram flickered one last time, then went dark. The silence that followed felt different now, not empty, but waiting. Alexander sank to his knees. The cold seeped into him, numbing his hands, his thoughts. He remembered the first time he met her, how she had looked at him across that office table, fearless and infuriating, challenging him to be more than the man the world demanded. And now, even in her absence, she was doing it again. Above him, another explosion cracked the night. The ceiling shuddered. The last of the facility was collapsing. He pushed himself up, breath ragged, and followed the faint flicker of emergency lights toward a service tunnel. The coordinates she mentioned flashed through his mind, repeating like a heartbeat. When he finally emerged outside, dawn had broken. The sky was a pale, bruised gray. The fire behind him still burned, but softer now, its smoke curling into the morning like a signal. He stumbled across the snow toward the ridge, every step heavier than the last. Behind him, the world they'd known was dissolving. A billion-dollar empire turned to ash, a machine without a master. At the crest he stopped. The cold air stung his lungs. The horizon was vast and blinding, the sun breaking through the clouds in ribbons of light. For the first time, the silence didn't scare him. It felt like an answer. He took the drive from his pocket, the one Elise had given him before she vanished, and held it up to the rising light. It caught the sun, scattering fragments of reflection across the snow. A shadow moved in the distance, then another. Figures, government vehicles, drones, sweeping the wreckage. They'd be here soon. He looked back at the burning ruins. You got your revolution, he murmured. Now what? But the wind carried no reply. Only the sound of the flames, softer now, like breathing. He closed his fist around the drive. The coordinates pulsed in his memory. The northern vault. Whatever was there, whatever she had left, it was the last piece of her he hadn't lost. He turned north. The journey through the snow was endless. Days blurred together, mountains, frozen rivers, silence. He traveled alone, haunted by fragments of her voice, her laughter, the ghost of her touch. Sometimes he thought he saw her ahead of him, just beyond reach, a glimmer of silver in the white, always vanishing before he could call her name. By the time he reached the coordinates, the world felt thinner, stripped bare. A single cabin stood at the edge of a frozen lake, its windows frosted, its roof heavy with snow. No guards, no cameras, just stillness. He pushed the door open. Inside was warmth, faint, unexpected. A small fire still burned in the hearth as if waiting. On the table lay a single item, a sealed envelope. He opened it carefully. Inside was a photograph, the two of them, years ago, on the night the company had finally turned profitable. She was laughing, her hand on his shoulder. He hadn't remembered anyone taking the picture. Beneath it, a note. Every empire ends. Ours just ended beautifully. He stared at the words until they blurred. Outside, the wind rose, whistling across the frozen lake. He could see the reflection of the flames dancing on the ice, the same reflection that had followed him since the night she disappeared. He sat down by the fire. For the first time in years, he let himself rest. The world outside was still burning, rebuilding, shifting. He could hear the distant thunder of helicopters, the hum of the new machine rising to replace the old. But inside the cabin, there was only silence. He reached for the photograph again. "You kept your promise," he whispered. "Now it's my turn." He placed the drive into the flames. The metal hissed, then melted, sparks bursting like stars before fading into ash. The truth, the secrets, the empire, all gone, only the promise remained. As the fire dimmed and the first snow of the evening began to fall, Alexander Vale leaned back in the chair, eyes half closed, and let the cold seep in. Gentle this time, not cruel. It no longer felt like punishment, it felt like peace. And far beyond the horizon, where the last traces of smoke met the dawn, the world turned quietly toward whatever came next. Snow fell in slow motion, weightless against the fading horizon. The fire in the cabin had long since died, leaving only the soft glow of embers breathing beneath the ashes. Alexander sat still, listening to the rhythm of the wind against the glass, a quiet, ancient sound that felt older than everything he had built and destroyed. The world outside was blanketed in white, a landscape erased, waiting for something new to be written across it. It had been 3 days since he burned the drive. 3 days since he had chosen silence over power. The helicopters had come and gone, sweeping through the mountains like ghosts of a system desperate to find its last missing piece. But they never found him. The cabin was too far, too forgotten. It existed in the thin line between nowhere and redemption. He spent the days in fragments patching the roof, melting snow for water, watching the ice shift across the lake. He didn't know what he was waiting for. Perhaps the world to move on, perhaps for her voice to fade from his memory, but it hadn't. It never would. Sometimes, when the light broke just right, he saw her reflection in the frost. Not as she was in the end, fierce and defiant, but as she had been the first day they met. The Elise who smiled like she knew the future but refused to tell him. The Elise who asked, "Do you believe people like us can ever love without control?" He hadn't answered then. He still couldn't now. The silence was a strange kind of comfort. It reminded him of what she had said in her last recording about promises becoming fire. He understood it now. She hadn't wanted him to keep building. She wanted him to stop trying to own what was meant to be felt. Power had been their language, but it was never their truth. The real promise had been to remember. At night he'd walk down to the edge of the frozen lake. The moonlight turned the ice into glass, and beneath it, dark water shifted with slow inevitability. He'd stand there until the cold numbed him completely, listening to the quiet heartbeat of a world trying to heal itself. Somewhere, deep below, the reflection of the fire still danced, a faint echo of what they had set in motion. He began writing again. Not reports, not contracts, just words, scattered lines in a notebook he found buried beneath old supplies. Thoughts about trust, loss, the weight of promises. About what it meant to destroy something to save its meaning. The ink bled in places from melted snow, and he didn't mind. The imperfections made it real. Every day the light lasted a little longer. The snow softened. The world thawed. One morning as he stepped outside, he saw something that stopped him cold. Footprints, not his. Fresh they led from the edge of the woods toward the lake. Small, precise steps, each pressed deep into the snow. His first thought was that they belonged to one of the search teams, but there were no tracks leading away, only toward the cabin. He followed them, heart tight in his chest. The trail stopped by the lake's edge, where the ice had thinned to glass, and there, half buried in the snow, lay a small silver pendant, a circle, etched with a faint pattern of waves. Elise's. He crouched, brushing the frost from its surface. The same pendant she used to wear under her coat, the one she never took off, saying it reminded her that even frozen water was still alive. He turned it over in his hand. The clasp was broken, but inside the locket was a folded piece of paper, carefully protected from time and cold. He opened it. A single line, written in her handwriting. "If you're reading this, it means you chose life." He stared at the words until the edges blurred. The pendant caught the morning light, scattering it across the ice like tiny stars. For the first time in years he smiled, not with triumph, not with certainty, but with peace. He looked out across the lake. The world felt vast again, unclaimed. Somewhere out there, the system was rebuilding, but not as it was. The files Elise released had already shifted everything, governments fracturing, corporations exposed, people waking from the illusion they'd been sold. Chaos, yes, but also clarity, a kind of rebirth. He didn't need to be part of it anymore. The revolution didn't belong to him, it never had. He returned to the cabin and hung the pendant near the window. When the sun hit it, the light spilled across the walls like liquid gold, warm and silent. He kept the note on the table, beside the photograph of the two of them. In that frozen place, they were both alive, to people who had built and burned an empire just to remember how to feel human again. Days passed. The thaw spread. Birds began to return, small shapes darting between the trees, their voices stitching life back into the silence. The ice on the lake cracked in slow, majestic lines, revealing the water beneath. He knew, eventually, someone would find him. Maybe the board, maybe the new government that rose from the ashes. They would want explanations, they would want stories. But what he had now wasn't a story. It was truth, simple, quiet, and final. He spent the last day before spring sitting by the fire, writing one last page. He wrote about promises, the kind made not with words but with choices. He wrote about Elise's fire and his cold, how they had needed each other to exist. He wrote about how power is just another kind of fear, dressed as control, and how love, in its purest form, is the only thing strong enough to destroy both. When he finished, he tore the page out and placed it under the photograph. Then he stepped outside one last time. The air smelled of meltwater and pine. The mountains glowed with the pale gold of morning. He walked down to the lake. The ice had nearly vanished, leaving a clear reflection of the sky, endless and new. He stood there for a long while, watching the ripples spread from where a single drop of water fell from a melting branch. And then, in the reflection, he saw her again. Not a vision, not a ghost. Just the memory of her smile, rising and fading with the light. He closed his eyes. "I kept my promise," he whispered. The wind answered, soft, approving. He took the pendant from his pocket, kissed the metal once, and let it fall into the water. It sank slowly, a thread of silver disappearing into blue. The lake stilled. The sky opened. And for the first time in years, Alexander Vale felt free, not from the world, but from the idea that he ever had to own it. He turned back toward the cabin, the snow crunching beneath his boots, the morning light chasing him like forgiveness. Behind him the lake shimmered, the reflection of the sun breaking into 1,000 tiny fires across the surface. He thought about what Elise had asked him once, long ago, when their empire was still young, and ambition still tasted sweet. "Do you think the cold can ever learn to love the fire?" He finally had his answer. Maybe it never had to. Maybe the fire had only ever existed to show the cold what it meant to feel alive. As the camera of the mind pulls back, the image lingers, a solitary cabin in the white, a man standing before the dawn, and a world slowly reborn from ashes and ice. The voice that carries through the wind is neither his nor hers, but something between them, a quiet echo that feels like truth. In the end, it wasn't about the promise we made to each other. It was about the one we made to ourselves to never stop choosing what's real, even when it burns. And as the scene fades to white, the question remains, not haunting but alive, suspended in the space between endings and beginnings. What do we become when the fire we feared finally teaches us to feel the cold? The snow falls again, slower this time, infinite and gentle. The wind carries the last traces of smoke into the distance. The lake reflects the sky like glass. And somewhere, beyond what can be seen or said, the promise endures, quiet, eternal, waiting to be remembered.